The call arrived on a Wednesday, a day so unremarkable that I could still taste coffee and find post-it notes clinging to my shirt. Just as the morning chaos tapered off, I had barely settled into my desk chair when my phone screen flashed with an unfamiliar number. There was no caller ID and no clear reason to pick up, but I answered anyway. Hello? Am I speaking to Claire Harmon? I paused, tightening my grip on the phone. Yes, this is Claire. This is Nick Leary from Summit Trust Bank. We're reaching out about your outstanding mortgage of $438,000. We had already sent several notifications, but I responded more sharply than I intended. I don't own a mortgage. You must have the wrong individual. There was a brief silence. Ma'am, our records list your name, date of birth, and social security number. According to the paperwork, you are the main borrower. The account was opened 4 years ago. 4 years. My thoughts froze. That was the same year my younger sister, Tessa Harmon, and I began discussing the idea of buying a house. I thought of it as my chance for a new beginning. I mentioned wanting a place spacious enough to raise children. I remembered waving around Pinterest inspirations at the dinner table and cracking jokes about credit scores as if they were old punchlines. My mother reassured us, "We'll figure something out. Family will always make it work." But not like this. I managed to end the conversation with forced politeness, then sat motionless, staring into space for a whole minute. The gentle whir of my laptop's fan was the only sound in the room. Sweat slicked my hands. My mouth felt parched. I tried convincing myself it had to be an error, a clerical issue, or perhaps a typo. Maybe someone with an identical name existed in our state. But my instincts told me otherwise. I rummaged through the drawer next to my bed, shuffling past outdated pay stubs and old birthday cards. Eventually, I uncovered the last letter I had received from Summit Trust Bank, an impersonal flyer discarded 6 months earlier. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Now, that moment seemed like a warning sign I'd failed to recognize. I found myself sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by scattered paperwork and open envelopes, gazing at the fragments of my own existence. I didn't own any real estate, had no car loan, and didn't share anything jointly with anyone else. My financial situation was intentionally uncomplicated. Yet somehow, someone had managed to saddle me with $438,000 in debt. And it wasn't just any unidentified person. Only one set of people ever possessed my entire legal name, social security number, and my signature, from years spent assisting them with things like FAFSA applications, medical forms, and paperwork for Summit Trust Bank. My family, Margaret Harmon and George Harmon. The suspicion crept in before I could suppress it. I wanted to reject the idea completely. Still, not every act of betrayal is loud. Sometimes, it's as subtle as someone locking the door quietly behind you. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay on my back, staring up at the ceiling, cycling through the same thought. Would I have agreed if they had come to me? I doubted it, yet that was beside the point. They simply never gave me the opportunity. When morning arrived, I stopped pretending this had all been some kind of error. All the details aligned too perfectly. The schedule, the words, the quiet. My younger sister had been sharing her plans for her dream home as recently as 6 months before that mortgage deadline. She pictured a porch wrapping around the house, plus a basement room finished for whatever came next. At that time, my younger sister was unemployed and looking for new work. Her credit was a mess, but our mother reassured her not to be concerned. My mother always manages somehow. Evidently, this time, I became the solution. I found myself pulling old paperwork out of my cabinet, records I hadn't touched in ages. Previous tax returns, Social Security paperwork, co-signed insurance policies from when my mother had needed surgery. And there, in my own handwriting, was everything someone would need to become me. Every piece of information required to impersonate me was right there. I had given everything over in small increments because I was seen as the responsible one, the person who fixed things, the silent child who avoided causing trouble. I remembered how my mother used to almost boast about it. I don't require assistance. I'm resilient. I always manage on my own. That was the compromise my younger sister Tessa got. Understanding, while I received quiet indifference. As a child, these were minor incidents. When my younger sister forgot her chores, it was excused as just a phase. But when I made the same mistake, I'd hear, "You know better, Claire." If she wrecked the car, my father, George Harmon, would just say, "Insurance will cover that." When I asked for a second-hand laptop, my mother, Margaret Harmon, was quick to remind me, "We don't have endless resources." It wasn't that they disliked me. That actually would have been simpler. They just never considered me someone fragile enough to fall apart. Perhaps that's the reason they felt justified signing my name, using my credit, and merging me into a falsehood that had the potential to destroy everything for me. Maybe they believed I was resilient enough to bear its weight. Yet beneath my composed surface, there had been a fundamental change. It wasn't fury or a thirst for payback. It was certainty. I powered up my laptop and submitted a request for the loan records from Summit Trust Bank. The woman who answered was courteous and efficient, seemingly unaware that the digital file she was about to send would upend my world. When it showed up in my inbox, I gazed at my monitor. The proof was right there, sheet after sheet. My name, my date of birth, all my details, even my signature. The catch was, it didn't actually belong to me. It was nearly identical, uncomfortably so. Someone must have rehearsed, analyzed, perhaps even traced it, but they failed to catch the wavering R or the tiny lift in the Y of my last name. The fake signature they made was smoother, more direct, full of an assurance I never had. Studying it felt like confronting an unfamiliar version of myself. It was a faked identity that managed to deceive everyone else, but not me. What terrified me the most was that I immediately recognized who had left it. I didn't reach out to them. I didn't message my younger sister or write some frantic text to my parents questioning how they could be responsible for this. I didn't yell or make demands. Instead, I began gathering every copy of any record that connected me to them. Tax returns, medical consent forms, school loan paperwork I had co-signed back when my father lost his employment. I searched back almost a decade, going through folders meticulously and piecing together a subtle documentary path. There was an overwhelming number of signatures, so many instances where I agreed out of obligation, affection, or ingrained routine. I agreed even in situations where no one actually requested it. Bit by bit, I printed out my personal documents, credit histories, identity monitoring logs, and an inventory of every account under my name. I'd never owned any real estate, yet there it sat before me. Summit Trust Bank's complete mortgage bundle featuring my signature on the form, witnessed, official, finalized, delivered, and then taken away. For a time, I kept all the paperwork spread out across my kitchen table, organized into precise stacks, as if I were preparing for a classroom assignment. Yet this wasn't schoolwork. It was about getting by. Elle Cartwright, a colleague from my job, sensed something wasn't right. She noticed how I would lose myself in a trance at lunchtime and chose to pull me aside. "You seem like you're barely breathing," she said. I confessed everything to her. I can't explain why. Perhaps because she was among the rare people who genuinely asked how I was and sincerely wanted to know. Elle didn't bother with reassurances. Instead, she took out her phone and told me, "Call this man. He's sharp and doesn't shy away from complicated families." That was my introduction to Mr. Randall Burke. He was older, had a military background, and maybe possessed a voice that trimmed away any unnecessary words. I found myself seated across from him at a cozy little coffee shop just 3 streets away from where I lived. There was no one to greet us at a front desk, and no fancy lobby, just him, a notepad in hand, and a cup of strong coffee. Without speaking, he quietly scanned through the pile of documents I'd brought along. Once he was done, he shut the folder, fixing his gaze directly on me. "You realize what this means, don't you?" he asked. "I think I do," I replied. "At a minimum, this includes fraud and identity theft," he specified. Hearing those accusations spoken so plainly made my chest tighten with anxiety. I simply nodded in response. My goal isn't to ruin anybody's life. I just need this reversed. "You're not ruining anyone," he assured me. "You're only taking back what belongs to you." Throughout the following hour, he patiently explained the process to me, reporting it to the police, sending written notice to Summit Trust Bank, providing all the evidence, formally disputing the mortgage, and pressing charges if needed. He cautioned me that this would be a drawn-out ordeal. He also made it clear that pursuing this would likely destroy any relationships I still had. The word burn echoed in my mind as I considered it, as if that bridge had ever existed, like I hadn't already spent years making my way on my own. When I got back, I pulled out an old birthday card from a box I'd avoided opening since settling in. The card was from my mother, Margaret Harmon. I spotted her flowing script before I bothered to read her words. "Happy 31st to our steady one. We don't say it enough, but you've always been our anchor, our fallback. I'm unbelievably grateful for you. Though it was clearly meant to be kind, I understand that now." Still, I couldn't help but sense the reality beneath the sentiment. My parents had always seen me as dependable, resilient, and quiet. So uncomplaining they assumed I'd always go along. But I'd had enough. I was tired of being the person they relied on when everything else fell apart. This time, I had finally made a plan for myself. Saturday arrived quickly, far too quickly. I planted myself in front of my parents' house, recognizable by its white shutters and the weathered driveway, as I clutched a folder inside my purse, half convinced it might scorch right through the leather. I hadn't spoken a single word to my parents throughout the entire week. That silence had lasted ever since I received those documents. Not since I found myself in Mr. Randall Burke's office. Mr. Randall Burke's office felt charged with tension, and I realized this was more than just complicated. It was actually illegal. Even so, I finally knocked on the door. Almost immediately, it swung open. My mother greeted me with an enthusiastic smile. "Claire, darling." She told me she was about to take the roast from the oven, as if everything were perfectly normal. I crossed the threshold. The familiar aroma of lemon cleaner mixed with onions filled the house, just as it always did. My younger sister was curled up on the couch, eyes glued to her phone, with an empty wine glass left on the end table. My father lounged in his favorite recliner, absorbed in a football match, as if nothing seismic had occurred. Nobody let their gaze linger on me for long. I quietly went through the motions at dinner. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans overwhelmed with garlic were on the table. My mother, Margaret Harmon, attempted light conversation. My younger sister, Tessa Harmon, griped about her homeowners association. My father, George Harmon, muttered in response to the television. I kept waiting. Once the plates were put away, I finally spoke. "Hey, quick question." Instantly, 3 sets of eyes focused on me. They looked only vaguely interested, with no sense of unease. Just another one of my practical questions, likely something about insurance or car maintenance. "Does anyone know anything about a mortgage that has my name on it?" The room went quiet, the type of silence that makes everything feel heavier. My younger sister's posture grew tense. My mother's smile stalled on her face. My father cleared his throat. I sat perfectly still, not moving or even blinking, simply holding out for a response. At last my mother broke the silence, her tone as gentle as if we were sorting out a past-due utility bill. "Oh, honey, it's just some paperwork. Margaret needed assistance to qualify. You're not actually paying for it. We're family." Tessa chimed in, still staring straight at the table. "You've got good credit. I don't. You're not being fair if you refuse to help. It just isn't right." As though I was being unreasonable for bringing it up. As if this had always been the way of things. I glanced at my mother, Margaret Harmon, the woman who raised me, and my younger sister, Tessa Harmon, whom I'd always shielded from bad dreams. My father, George Harmon, who once told me I brought him peace amid chaos, sat there too. None of them considered their actions to be wrong. They believed this was simply how things were meant to be, so I simply nodded once, my expression flat. "Thank you for explaining," I murmured, keeping my voice down. My younger sister was already more at ease, her attention back on her phone. My father reached out for the TV remote. My mother seemed visibly relieved, as if a problem had quietly resolved itself. Nobody registered that something had fundamentally changed. They all assumed I remained unchanged. I was still the reserved one, still dependable. Yet I hadn't come to argue. I came to listen, to allow them the opportunity, and all they did was try to rationalize what they'd hidden. The following morning, I submitted the police report. Detective Carla Price at the station wore an expression that suggested she had handled far too many family matters, exhausted yet cordial, and always methodical. When I presented him with the folder that Mr. Randall Burke and I had assembled, he thumbed through the contents at a deliberate pace, his forehead furrowing a little more with each document. "Are you certain you wish to proceed with this?" he inquired, not because he doubted me, but because he was cautious. If I didn't, I told him, they would simply continue as before. He acknowledged this and applied an official stamp to the forms. It was done. Later that day, I sent a certified letter to Summit Trust Bank. I included the police documentation, a formal complaint, and photocopies of my identification. I watched as the postal clerk pushed the envelope into the outgoing bin, treating it as though it were nothing out of the ordinary. For me, though, it marked a definitive ending. It was an unspoken final barrier etched in pen. I didn't let them know it was coming. There was no heated conversation, no dramatic scenes, only wordless distance. 3 days slipped past, then 5, and soon an entire week. No phone calls, not a single message, just the constant nagging sense of anticipation for something to give way. Eventually, it did. On Thursday evening, right after the sun went down, a knock sounded at my door. I looked through the peephole and recognized my mother outside, wearing her best coat, her expression strained with a mix of anger and anxiety. I pulled open the door without moving out of the way. She didn't wait for me to invite her in. "How could you?" she spat. "How dare you go to the police?" Her words were biting, but underneath, I picked up on what was really there. Fear. Fear not for me, but for what exposure would bring. I stayed silent. "I thought you would understand," my mother pressed on. "Tessa needed help. Family stands by each other." "No," I told her quietly. "Family asks. They don't take things without asking." My measured response seemed to hit her even harder than any shout could. "You've destroyed everything," she barked. "Do you realize what this looks like?" I almost laughed, but I hadn't. There was nothing that I had destroyed. I told her. I just stopped acting like it wasn't falling apart. She looked ready to protest, but by then I was already shutting the door behind me. As the latch caught with a soft click, it seemed to echo louder to me than any shout ever could. Tessa Harmon called me 9 times, leaving 3 voicemails, each one more furious than the previous. I erased them without listening to a single one. When I woke up the next day, there was an email waiting from Summit Trust Bank. Our mortgage loan has been put on hold for additional investigation. A formal apology was attached as well. They indicated that they were checking all the notary paperwork and signature files. Although my credit report was still taking a hit, things were finally starting to come apart. I reached out to Mr. Randall Burke. I told him they were taking this matter seriously. "They generally do," he answered. "That's what happens when you skip the yelling and simply reveal the facts." What he said was true. I didn't lose my temper, and I never pleaded. I simply stood my ground while the truth slowly did what it needed to. Yet, in a strange way, that felt sufficient. Over the following several weeks, the silence surrounding me only deepened. There were no more messages, no further get-togethers, and the feeling of obligation disappeared. Subtle hints faded away, each one reminding me to appreciate my parents. Fixing the problems was not their goal. What they wanted was the old version of me who never refused. But she wasn't around anymore. So I began to spend my Saturdays and Sundays doing the simple activities I'd once forgotten I enjoyed. I would stroll to the farmer's market, bring home fresh flowers to brighten my kitchen, and read undisturbed, my phone silent. Vengeance wasn't what I sought. Honestly, all I craved was a little space and tranquility. For the first time, I possessed both those things. 6 months went by. As autumn snuck in softly, the trees burst with gentle pink and yellow blossoms, as if the earth itself had chosen to begin anew. Despite my hesitation, I kept moving forward, keeping my focus on what mattered. I replied to emails from Mr. Randall Burke. I met with Mr. Randall Burke to fill out paperwork, reviewing my credit report as though it were an unreliable weather channel. The investigation remained ongoing. Although the effects lingered, I felt a sense of calm settle within me. During weekends, I stayed busy, hiking local paths, taking pottery classes at the community center, and helping out at the library each Saturday. Nothing extraordinary, just activities I claimed as my own. These were hours that belonged to me alone. One day, I found myself at my booth during a neighborhood artisan fair, surrounded by an assortment of uneven mugs and bowls I had crafted with hesitant hands. I watched as a customer picked up a cup I had titled Reclamation. It was a bit lopsided, with both smooth and rough patches that accentuated its flaws. She rolled it in her hand and asked me what had inspired the name. I simply said, "Because it shouldn't really exist, but somehow it does." She grinned, handed me cash, and went on her way. Later that evening, I relaxed outside on my balcony with a mug in hand. Of tea and the first true peace I had known in so long. It wasn't the hush of being overlooked, but the calm of not belonging to anyone. That was when I noticed them. My mother, my father, and my younger sister stood at the far side of the apartment parking lot, as though uncertain about approaching or turning away. They seemed smaller than I recalled. My younger sister's mascara was smeared. My father's shirt was creased and hung loosely outside his pants. My mother clung to her handbag as if it was her last secure possession. I descended the staircase at an easy pace, making no attempt to hurry or conceal myself. As soon as they recognized me, they went completely still. "Claire?" my mother called out, her voice shaky. We had our faults, but we remained a family regardless. Tessa moved a step ahead. "I just needed a bit of support, for only a short time. Please don't keep us at a distance." The anger inside me was gone. I felt no rage now. Only a profound and steady quiet settled within me as I realized they weren't present out of love for me. They were there because they required my help once again. I placed my bag on the floor and gazed at them. I made sure to take in each of their faces. Deliberately, I said, "I hope that someday you come to comprehend what genuine family actually is." They stayed silent, but I knew that family isn't something that can be taken, faked, or demanded only when it suits you. I slipped my hand into my coat pocket and brought out a manila envelope. Inside was a printed copy of the fraudulent mortgage document bearing my name. Their signatures appeared beneath a bright red stamp marked Void across the cover. Behind that was another item, a birthday card from several years ago, the one with "You've always been our backup plan" written inside. I passed the envelope over to my mother. Her hands trembled as she accepted it. "I'm not upset," I told her. "Not anymore." My mother parted her lips as if to reply, yet I didn't wait. "I'm finally free," I told myself, "and I have no intention of returning." After that, I turned my back and left. The echo of my footsteps on the staircase weighed more than any argument I could have made. I refused to glance behind me. When I arrived at the top of the stairs, I paused for a moment. A breeze caught the hem of my coat. The setting sun stretched shadows all the way across the parking area. I murmured, "This isn't for them. This is for me alone." Sometimes, the act of leaving says more than any words, and I absolutely meant it. They used my name as if it belonged to them, but I still walked away. There were no shouts or warnings, just a silence they couldn't pretend didn't exist. If you've ever felt like someone's afterthought, you'll understand why I never turned around.